Good afternoon and a happy Easter. I hope you're having a great break and eating lots of chocolate like I am. Now, last week I dropped a teaser about this particular picture I wanted to talk about at length that I acquired recently. It's an original sketch from 1875 by an artist called Frederick Piercy, who was an English artist, but he also had connections to a very important time in one of the most notorious churches in the world. So, Frederick was born in England in 1830 and he was ordained as a priest in the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And his artistic talent came to prominence in London when he took a whole bunch of commissions from members of the LDS Church, and he decided that he wanted to create a series of images depicting the pilgrimage that English Mormons were making to Salt Lake City, which was the hive of, or the central location for Mormonism in the world, but also signaling the expansion of the religion across the world. So he headed out from Liverpool and made his way to Salt Lake City with a view of illustrating the whole journey. So he would draw sketches of just the landscapes of places like Missouri, Wyoming, all along the Mississippi River until he got to Utah, which is where Salt Lake City is, and the settlement. And this was about 9 years after Joseph Smith had been murdered. He was the original founder of the Mormon Church, or the Church of Latter-day Saints, and he was murdered in what was called Carthage Jail by an angry mob who were against his beliefs. Now, once he arrived there, he made this long and arduous journey across America, cataloguing it as he went in sketches. He met up with a few different members of the Smith family at the Nauvoo Mansion, which was where Joseph Smith's widow, I think Lucy Kate, was still living. She was quite old by that stage. And their children, well, he had numerous children, but while he was living there with them at the mansion, he did portrait commissions of them. So he did portrait commissions of the widow Smith, but also David, one of the sons, and Joseph Smith Jr. And so impressed was the family that the word got out to Brigham Young, who Brigham Young was the gentleman who took over the reins of the Church of Latter-day Saints after Joseph Smith's demise. And he also requested a portrait commission. So all these works were, once he got back to London the next year, 1854, he put them together into a volume which was called Illustrated Route, for short, which was Liverpool to Salt Lake City. It was a series of engravings and his personal experiences and diaries along the journey. And it was edited by a guy named James Linford, a fellow Mormon. Now, it got to the stage where he released this book and it became the main travel guide for English Mormons on their journey. So it was very popular for a very short period until the route changed, where it became shorter, and so his book was less relevant. However, the Mormon Church wanted to have the rights to the book, and so it made the request to Linford and to Piercy, and it was agreed upon for £100 that they would hand over the writings, but also the plates, which were the most important thing, because this was before the photography of the community was started. So this was the first illustrated database of images for the journey west. So there was a little bit of miscommunication along the way, and Piercy only ended up with £75 as opposed to the £100 they'd agreed upon. And so he made the situation quite difficult for Brigham Young. And at this time, this was during the Mormon Reformation, where Brigham Young had asked for all Mormons to return to Salt Lake City or just make the pilgrimage and to immigrate there permanently to strengthen the religion. And Piercy was one of his targets, and Piercy, who had a young family in London now, he said no, he didn't want to come along. And this frustrated, in light of these miscommunications about money that was owed. And this made Brigham Young certainly very angry, and he decided to excommunicate Piercy from the church. So he was no longer part of the Church of Latter-day Saints. So afterwards, he stayed back in London, and he worked as an artist and a portrait commission, and he did works like this in 1875, but his output was significantly less than it was back when he was working as part of the Mormon Church. So these works are incredibly rare, and those that do exist are in a few museums in America. Now, he lived next door to the National Gallery in London, and he was... as I said, his output was very small, so he only exhibited a handful of pictures at the Royal Academy and the Suffolk Art Gallery, which were the two major exhibition spaces at the time. I'm not sure, I've done some research. This is possibly one that was exhibited at the Suffolk Art Gallery at the time. But in 1881, his wife passed away, and he was remarried to an artist called Catherine Warnham, who was the daughter of a long-standing curator of the National Gallery, and they lived out their days until 1891. And his, as I said, his output was fairly low, and a big reason for that was because his health was diminished. He actually suffered from paralysis for the last 10 years of his life until he died in 1891, which coincided with the death of his wife when he first would have experienced this illness. So, as I said, these works are incredibly rare, but the book itself, the original edition illustrated route from Liverpool to Salt Lake City, which was published in 1855, copies of these manuscripts sell for regularly at auction for between $20,000 and $50,000. So they're incredibly important manuscripts historically for the Mormon Church, and these were the early days and early accounts of the church in Salt Lake City. So hopefully you've learned something that was very interesting. Oh, one more thing, that this lady, I'm sure you're wondering, is this a Mormon or a believer in the Church of Latter-day Saints? Well, it actually isn't, because she's wearing a crucifix. Now, most people will know that the crucifix is worshipped by Christianity, but it's not by the Church of Latter-day Saints. It's been a topic. I love getting artifacts like this because they're associated with incredibly interesting stories, but I've always been interested in the workings of the Mormon Church since I read this book about 7 or 8 years ago called Under the Banner of Heaven, and it has been made into a series, I believe, but it was written by John Krakauer, who wrote the Everest. There's a book about Everest and a few other travel books, and it's a fascinating account into the beginnings of the Joseph Smith saga and Mormonism. And say what you will, I'm not a believer in any religion, but it's just a fascinating background in how people choose to follow and have faith, and I do recommend that. And obviously the Book of Mormon by South Park, which is a very funny story about the church and their beliefs. So hopefully you've learned something this Easter, and I hope you have a great rest of your Easter. And if you want to check out more about this will be on my website with its story. So see you later.